I'm Cassandra Mitchell, 32, a software engineer in Seattle with a comfortable life I built from scratch. 3 months ago, my mother Janet uttered words that shattered my heart. "You're no longer welcome in this family. Stay away from now on." All because I refused to loan her money for a suspicious investment. 90 days of silence followed, until my phone rang unexpectedly. "Hello, this is Thomas Wilson, your mother's financial advisor. We need to talk about Janet." That call changed everything. Before I dive into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and stick around to discover how one phone call forced me to confront the painful truth about my mother's situation. Hashtag part 2, background and family dynamics. Growing up in Portland wasn't extraordinary, but it was stable. We lived in a modest two-story house in a middle-class neighborhood with well-maintained lawns and friendly neighbors who knew each other by name. My childhood memories include Sunday pancakes, summer bike rides through the neighborhood, and heated Monopoly games where my dad always let me be the banker. My mother, Janet Mitchell, worked as a bank teller at First Portland Credit Union for 23 years. She was efficient, punctual, and well-regarded by her colleagues. Mom always had an eye for the finer things, though. She'd flip through luxury magazines during her lunch breaks, circling items she'd buy someday. Her favorite phrase was "when our ship comes in," spoken with a wistful sigh as she admired a handbag or vacation spot beyond our means. Dad, Brian Mitchell, was the practical counterbalance to Mom's aspirational tendencies. As an accountant at a small local firm, he managed our family finances with meticulous care. He taught me to save 20% of every dollar I earned, even from my 12-year-old babysitting gigs. "Live below your means, Cassie," he'd say, "and you'll never lie awake worrying about bills." His penny-pinching ways sometimes frustrated Mom, but their system worked. We never had debt beyond a sensible mortgage that they paid off before I finished college. I took after Dad in many ways. While Mom dreamed of luxury cruises, I saved for computer parts. Dad noticed my interest in technology early, buying me my first programming book when I was 14. We'd sit at the kitchen table debugging my early coding attempts while Mom watched TV in the living room. Those moments with Dad shaped my future, leading me to pursue computer science at the University of Washington. College wasn't easy. My parents contributed what they could, but I worked part-time jobs and took out modest loans to cover the rest. Graduation day was especially sweet with both parents beaming in the audience. Dad whispered, "I always knew you'd do something remarkable," while Mom proudly told everyone within earshot about her daughter, the computer genius. After landing my first job at a Seattle tech startup, I established myself as a reliable software engineer. For years later, I moved to a larger company with better benefits and advancement opportunities. My salary grew steadily, but my lifestyle remained modest: a small but comfortable apartment, reliable car, and healthy retirement contributions. Dad's financial wisdom had stuck with me. Then came the phone call that changed our family forever. Dad collapsed at work one Tuesday afternoon. Heart attack. He was only 54. By the time I rushed from Seattle to Portland, he was gone. The funeral was a blur of tearful hugs and casseroles. Mom seemed to move through those days like a sleepwalker, nodding mechanically at condolences. I stayed for 2 weeks, helping her navigate the initial paperwork and adjustments. Dad, ever the planner, had left everything in order: life insurance, will, even labeled folders for accounts and passwords. Mom would be financially secure, though far from wealthy. I returned to Seattle with a promise to visit monthly, but something shifted in those first months after Dad's death. Mom started changing. At first, it was subtle: a designer purse here, expensive restaurant receipts there. When I questioned these purchases during my visits, she'd respond with uncharacteristic defensiveness. "I'm allowed to enjoy life a little, Cassandra. Your father kept such tight purse strings." 6 months after Dad's funeral, Mom joined the Lakeview Country Club, an expense that made me choke on my coffee when she mentioned the membership fees. "Mom, that's more than your old mortgage payment," I pointed out. "I'm making connections," she responded coolly. "Meeting new people. You should be happy I'm not sitting home alone." Our monthly visits grew increasingly tense. Mom's house began filling with new furniture, art pieces, and clothes still bearing tags. Her new friends were all from the country club, people with old money and sophisticated tastes who seemed to look through me when I visited. Mom began referring to these acquaintances frequently, dropping names and anecdotes about their vacations and investments. Shirley's daughter never questions her spending, she'd remark pointedly during our conversations. Meanwhile, I continued my steady career path in Seattle. I received promotions, contributed to my 401k, and even purchased a small condo. When Mom visited once and saw my modest home, she seemed almost disappointed. "With what they pay you, couldn't you afford something in a better neighborhood?" she asked, eyeing my practical furniture with thinly veiled disapproval. "I like my neighborhood," I replied. "And I'm saving for early retirement." She sighed dramatically. "You're too young to worry about retirement. You sound just like your father." Her words were meant as criticism, but I took them as a compliment. Still, the growing disconnect between us was painful. The mother who had once clipped coupons and comparison shopped was now spending with abandon. When I gently suggested she might be burning through her safety net, she accused me of trying to control her. "Your father controlled the money for 30 years, she snapped. "Now it's my turn." With each visit home, I recognized less of the practical woman who had raised me. Her new friends, her new spending habits, her new dismissive attitude toward financial caution, it was like watching a stranger inhabit my mother's body. Yet beneath my concern lurked a deeper fear. Mom was trying to fill the void Dad left behind, and nothing seemed to be working. ## Part 3. The Breaking Point. The name Floyd Turner entered our lives on a rainy Sunday afternoon during one of my monthly visits to Portland. Mom and I were having tea in her newly redecorated living room when she casually dropped it into conversation. "Floyd says the market is primed for aggressive growth in specialized sectors," she remarked, stirring her tea with the silver spoon from a set I'd never seen before. "Floyd?" I asked, setting down my cup. "Floyd Turner," Mom replied with a hint of pride. "He's quite respected in investment circles. We met at the club last month." Something in her tone, a schoolgirl enthusiasm, immediately set off warning bells. Mom went on to describe Floyd, a distinguished man in his early 60s with salt and pepper hair, custom suits, and a Mercedes convertible. According to her, he had made millions through strategic investments and now shared his wisdom with a select circle of friends. "He's been so generous with his advice," Mom gushed. "He says most financial advisors are too conservative, missing the truly transformative opportunities." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral while mentally cataloging these red flags. On the drive back to Seattle that evening, I conducted a quick search on my phone during a rest stop. Floyd Turner had no LinkedIn profile, no professional website, and no credentials with any major financial institution. My unease deepened. Over the next 2 months, Floyd's name dominated our phone conversations. Mom spoke about exclusive investment opportunities and special access deals with increasing frequency. When I asked for specifics, her answers remained vague but enthusiastic. "It's quite technical, Cassandra. Floyd says most people don't have the background to understand these sophisticated vehicles." My research into Floyd Turner continued in my spare time. A deep internet search revealed complaints on obscure financial forums, mentions of promised returns that never materialized, and investments that couldn't be liquidated. Nothing had reached the level of formal charges, but the pattern was concerning. During my next visit, I arrived with printouts of my findings, determined to have a frank conversation. Mom listened for approximately 90 seconds before cutting me off. "This is ridiculous," she said, pushing the papers away. "You found some nameless people complaining online. That proves nothing." Floyd warned me that unsuccessful people often try to smear his reputation out of jealousy. "Mom, please," I started. "He has a 30-year track record of success," she interrupted. "He's trusted by doctors, lawyers, even a state senator." "What do you know about high-level investing, Cassandra? Writing computer code doesn't make you a financial expert." I backed off temporarily, but observed Mom and Floyd together at dinner that evening. He was exactly as she described, expensively dressed, articulate, and charismatic. Throughout the meal, he dropped references to his properties in Aspen and Maui, his friendships with unnamed celebrities, and his uncanny ability to sense market movements before they happen. What struck me most was how he barely asked me any questions about myself. When I mentioned my work in software engineering, he nodded dismissively and redirected the conversation to a confidential deal he was orchestrating involving cryptocurrency and international real estate. The following morning, Mom asked to speak with me privately in the kitchen. Her expression was serious yet excited as she sat across from me at the breakfast table. "I need to ask you something important," she began. "An extraordinary investment opportunity has come up through Floyd. The returns are projected at 30 to 40% within 8 months. My stomach tightened as she continued. The minimum buy-in is $75,000. I've got $25,000 I can access immediately, but I need $50,000 more. She reached across the table to grasp my hand. I'd like you to loan me the money, Cassie. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. The request hung between us in the sunny kitchen that suddenly felt airless. I pulled my hand away gently. Mom, I can't do that, I said quietly. Everything about this situation concerns me. Her face hardened. What do you mean? Carefully, I laid out my concerns. The lack of verifiable credentials, the complaint patterns I'd found, the vague descriptions of the actual investments, the unrealistic promised returns, and the pressure tactics. Classic signs of financial fraud, Mom. I'm worried you're being taken advantage of. Mom's face flushed red. You think I'm stupid? That I can't recognize a good opportunity? It's not about intelligence, I explained. These people are professional manipulators. They target smart, successful people. Floyd is not these people, she snapped. He's shown me documentation, projections, testimonials from other investors. You've spent a total of 3 hours with him and think you know everything. Can I see this documentation? I asked. He keeps most materials secure due to the confidential nature of the investments. But I've seen everything I need to see. Our conversation deteriorated rapidly. Mom accused me of being jealous of her potential success, of trying to control her like Dad had, of being rigidly risk-averse and unable to recognize exceptional opportunities. I maintained that no legitimate investment required such secrecy or promised such unrealistic returns. If you won't help me, I'll find another way, she finally declared. I thought you'd be happy to share in this opportunity, but clearly you've inherited your father's limited vision. Dad's limited vision kept this family financially secure for decades, I retorted, my own temper finally flaring. He would be horrified to see you gambling his life insurance money on what sounds like an obvious scam. The moment those words left my mouth, I knew I'd crossed a line. Mom's face went from flushed to pale, her eyes widening with hurt before narrowing with fury. Get out, she whispered. Mom, I'm sorry, I didn't mean. You're no longer welcome in this family, she said, her voice gaining strength and coldness with each word. Stay away from now on. I don't need your judgment or your money. I tried to apologize, to explain that my words came from fear for her security, but she walked out of the kitchen and up the stairs. The slam of her bedroom door punctuated our conversation's end. After 30 minutes of waiting in the silent house, I packed my overnight bag and drove back to Seattle, tears blurring the highway most of the way home. Over the next 3 months, I made multiple attempts at reconciliation. I sent texts, emails, flowers, even handwritten letters apologizing for my harsh words while gently reiterating my concerns. Mom's responses, when they came at all, were brief and cold. I received your message. No need to contact me. Please respect my wishes. I called her best friend Susan, who reluctantly told me that Mom was pursuing new directions and spending time with more positive influences. When I pressed for more information about Floyd Turner's continued presence, Susan grew uncomfortable and ended the call. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly alone. Dad was gone, and now Mom had shut me out completely. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects and volunteering for weekend shifts to avoid sitting in my empty condo with my thoughts. At night, I alternated between anger at Mom's foolishness and guilt over my handling of the situation. Maybe I should have been gentler. Maybe I should have loaned her the money with conditions attached. Maybe I should have found a way to investigate Floyd more thoroughly before confronting her. My phone remained silent. My emails went unanswered. The mother who had once called me twice weekly now treated me as if I'd ceased to exist. The pain of this rejection was almost physical, a constant ache beneath my ribs that worsened at night when distractions fell away. 92 days after our falling out, I had almost resigned myself to permanent estrangement. Then came the call that would change everything. Thursdays were typically my busiest workdays. Our team had standing product review meetings from 8 to 10, followed by a coding sprint that usually lasted until late afternoon. I generally silenced my phone during this focused time, but on this particular Thursday, I was expecting an important call from a vendor, so I kept it within reach. When the unknown Portland number flashed across my screen at 11:47 a.m., my heart leapt with hope that it might be Mom finally reaching out. I quickly stepped into an empty conference room and answered. Cassandra Mitchell speaking. Hello, Ms. Mitchell. My name is Thomas Wilson. I'm a certified financial advisor with Portland Financial Partners. The male voice was professional but carried an undertone of concern. I'm afraid I'm not in the market for financial services, I began, preparing to end the call. I'm not calling to solicit business, he interjected quickly. I'm actually your mother Janet Mitchell's new financial advisor, and I'm calling about a matter of some urgency. My grip tightened on the phone. Is my mother all right? Physically, yes, Thomas assured me. But I have concerns about her financial situation that I felt ethically obligated to discuss with a family member. I sank into a chair, torn between relief that Mom wasn't hurt and fresh anxiety about what might prompt a financial advisor to make such a call. I should make it clear, Thomas continued, that your mother hasn't authorized this conversation. In fact, she specifically asked me not to contact you. However, after reviewing her accounts and recent transaction history, I believe she may be involved in a potentially fraudulent investment scheme. My professional ethics require me to take reasonable steps to prevent what appears to be financial exploitation. This is about Floyd Turner, isn't it? I asked, my suspicions immediately crystallizing. The momentary silence on the other end confirmed my fears before Thomas even spoke. You're aware of Mr. Turner, then, he said, not quite a question. He's the reason my mother, and I haven't spoken in 3 months, I explained, briefly summarizing our falling out over the requested loan. Thomas sighed audibly. Your instincts were correct, Ms. Mitchell. I've been your mother's official financial advisor for just 2 weeks. She transferred her accounts to our firm at Mr. Turner's suggestion, apparently to work with someone who understands aggressive growth strategies. And you don't, I surmised. What I understand is that your mother has already transferred significant sums to investment accounts under Mr. Turner's control, with virtually no documentation, prospectus, or legitimate investment structure. The patterns match known investment fraud schemes. My blood ran cold. How much has she transferred? Thomas hesitated. I'm walking a fine ethical line here, Ms. Mitchell. Your mother is a competent adult who hasn't granted you access to her financial information. That said, the amounts are substantial enough to potentially impact her long-term security, which is why I'm reaching out despite the professional risk. I appreciate that risk, I said sincerely. And I promise this conversation will remain confidential. After another moment's hesitation, Thomas continued. In the past 6 months, she's transferred approximately $175,000 to various entities associated with Mr. Turner. These transfers were made from her primary accounts before they came to our firm. I only discovered them through reviewing her previous statements during our onboarding process. I gasped. That's nearly half of what Dad left her. What concerns me even more, Thomas continued, is that she's scheduled another transfer of $200,000 for this Saturday, essentially the bulk of her remaining liquid assets. When I questioned this transfer and suggested we review the investment documentation together, she became defensive and insisted I process the transaction without unnecessary scrutiny. Leaning forward in my chair, I pressed my free hand against my forehead, trying to absorb the magnitude of the situation. Have you found anything concrete about Floyd Turner? Only what a discreet preliminary investigation could turn up, Thomas replied. He's not registered with the SEC, FINRA, or any state securities division. He claims to operate through offshore entities that aren't subject to U.S. regulations. This alone is a massive red flag. Additionally, I found records of complaints filed against him in Arizona and Florida approximately 8 and 5 years ago, respectively. Neither resulted in formal charges, but the patterns described are identical to what your mother appears to be experiencing. Why wouldn't those complaints lead to charges? I asked. Unfortunately, that's common in these cases. Victims often refuse to cooperate with investigations out of embarrassment or continued belief in the scammer. Some reach private settlements that include non-disclosure agreements. Mr. Turner appears quite skilled at staying just on the legal side of fraud, making promises verbally while keeping written documents vague enough to provide legal cover. I took a deep breath. What do you suggest we do? Legally, our options are limited, Thomas admitted. Your mother is making these decisions voluntarily. She hasn't been declared incompetent, and technically, Mr. Turner hasn't done anything explicitly illegal that we can prove. But if you're willing, I think a personal intervention might be our best option. Would you consider coming to Portland? The irony wasn't lost on me. After months of being explicitly told to stay away, I was now being asked to rush back to help the mother who had rejected me. Yet despite the hurt, the answer was obvious. I can be there tonight, I said without hesitation. Where should we meet? Thomas suggested his office at 9 tomorrow morning, giving me his card information and the address of Portland Financial Partners. Before ending the call, he added one final piece of advice. Don't try to contact your mother before we meet. Based on my interactions with clients in similar situations, it could prompt her to accelerate her plans with Mr. Turner. The element of surprise might be crucial here. After hanging up, I sat motionless in the conference room for several minutes, processing the conversation. Then, with sudden determination, I returned to my desk, informed my team lead I had a family emergency, and began making arrangements for my trip to Portland. On the 3-hour drive south, my emotions cycled between vindication that my suspicions about Floyd had been correct, anger at Mom for falling victim to such an obvious scheme, and guilt that I hadn't found a way to prevent this situation. Mostly, though, I felt a gnawing worry. Even if we managed to stop this final transfer, Mom had already lost a substantial sum, money meant to support her through retirement, money Dad had worked his entire life to provide. As Seattle's skyline disappeared in my rearview mirror, I realized that beyond the financial concerns lay a more painful question. How would Mom react to my return? Would she see my intervention as help or as further evidence that I didn't respect her judgment? The answers waited for me in Portland, along with a confrontation I both dreaded and knew was absolutely necessary. Obvious fabrication, he replied smoothly, though I noticed he made no move to actually touch or examine the documents. Janet, wealthy, successful people always attract detractors and jealous competitors who try to smear their reputations. I warned you this might happen if word of our investment opportunity spread. Thomas took over, his professional demeanor lending credibility to our case. Mr. Turner, I've been a certified financial advisor for 22 years. The investment structure you've described to Mrs. Mitchell violates multiple securities regulations. The returns you've promised are mathematically implausible through any legitimate investment strategy. Floyd stood suddenly. Janet, we don't need to subject ourselves to these baseless accusations. Let's continue our discussion elsewhere. It was the first sign of cracks in his composure, a strategic retreat rather than continued defense. Mom remained seated, her eyes now fixed on the documents spread across the table. Mrs. Mitchell, Thomas continued gently, the transfer you've scheduled for tomorrow would move almost all of your remaining liquid assets into accounts controlled solely by Mr. Turner. Once that money leaves your verified accounts, there's no guarantee you'll ever see it again. That's preposterous, Floyd scoffed, though his voice had lost some of its smooth confidence. Janet has already seen excellent returns on her previous investments. The statements clearly show. Paper gains aren't the same as actual returns, I interrupted. Mom, have you ever actually withdrawn any money from these investments? Has any of it ever come back to your regular accounts? A flicker of uncertainty crossed Mom's face. I haven't needed to withdraw anything yet. We're reinvesting the gains for maximum growth. Convenient, I said quietly. Floyd checked his watch with exaggerated impatience. Janet, I have another appointment across town. Shall we go? You can call your advisor later if you still have concerns. His attempt to separate Mom from us was so transparent it nearly made me laugh, despite the gravity of the situation. Before Mom could respond, there was another knock at the door. Thomas's assistant entered, followed by Lisa, who had agreed to arrive later with the final piece of our strategy. I'm sorry to interrupt, Lisa said, projecting professional authority, but I thought you should see this immediately. She handed Thomas a folder, positioning herself strategically to block Floyd's path to the door. Thomas opened the folder and nodded grimly. Thank you, Miss Brennan. He turned to Mom. Mrs. Mitchell, this is a list of individuals who have filed complaints against Mr. Turner under his various aliases. 3 of them have agreed to speak with you directly about their experiences. This is absurd, Floyd snapped, his charming demeanor now completely abandoned. Janet, these people are interfering with a private business relationship. We should contact the authorities. Please do, Lisa replied calmly. I have contacts at the Financial Crimes Division who would be very interested in meeting you, Mr. Turner. I took the liberty of providing them with your current address and alias already. It was a bluff. Lisa had no official capacity in this situation, but the effect on Floyd was immediate and telling. His face paled visibly. Janet, he said, his voice now urgent rather than smooth, we need to leave. Now. These people are manipulating you. Mom looked from Floyd to me, then to the documents on the table, conflict evident in her expression. The momentum was shifting, but Floyd wasn't finished. He knelt beside Mom's chair, taking her hands in his. Everything we've planned, all the wonderful opportunities we've discussed, your dream home in Maui, financial independence, these people want to take that away from you. They don't believe in you like I do. It was a masterful last attempt, appealing directly to Mom's dreams and emotions rather than addressing the evidence. For a terrible moment, I saw her wavering. Then Mom did something unexpected. She gently withdrew her hands from Floyd's and picked up the folder of complaints. I'd like to read these, please. Floyd stood abruptly, straightening his jacket. His demeanor changed completely, cold calculation replacing the faux warmth. I see they've gotten to you too. What a disappointment. The casual cruelty of his dismissal, discarding Mom like a suddenly worthless investment, seemed to confirm everything we'd been saying more effectively than any document could have. I think you should leave, Mr. Turner, Thomas said firmly. Floyd's eyes darted around the room, assessing and recalculating. Whatever he saw, 4 determined faces, incriminating documentation, no easy escape with the money, apparently led him to a simple conclusion. This particular scam was over. This isn't the end of this discussion, he said to Mom, attempting to recover some dignity. Call me when you've come to your senses. Without another word, he strode from the office. We all heard his footsteps quicken as he reached the hallway, almost running by the time he reached the elevator. In the silence that followed his departure, Mom slowly opened the folder and began reading the statements from Turner's previous victims. Her hands trembled slightly, but her face remained composed. None of us spoke, giving her the space to process what was happening. After several minutes, she closed the folder and looked up. For the first time that day, her eyes met mine directly. How much have I already lost? She asked quietly. The question hung in the air like delicate glass, fragile, transparent, revealing. How much have I already lost? Mom's voice had been barely above a whisper, but it filled the suddenly silent room. Thomas cleared his throat gently. Based on my analysis of your accounts, approximately $175,000 has been transferred to entities associated with Mr. Turner over the past 7 months. Mom closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, they shimmered with unshed tears. There's more, she said. Before I transferred my accounts to your firm, I liquidated some investments Dad had set aside. Special ones he told me never to touch except in emergencies. My stomach dropped. The Microsoft stock? Dad had purchased Microsoft stock in the early days, holding on to it through splits and growth. It had been his pride, his one speculative investment that had paid off tremendously. He'd always told Mom those shares were their ultimate emergency fund. Mom nodded, not meeting my eyes. $75,000 worth. Floyd said it was underperforming compared to his investment vehicles. Thomas made a quick note. That brings the total to approximately $250,000. $250,000, Mom said flatly. Gone. We don't know that for certain yet, Thomas said, though his tone lacked conviction. We can attempt to trace the funds, possibly file complaints with regulatory authorities. Stop, Mom interrupted. Please don't. Don't give me false hope. I can see it in your face. That money is gone, isn't it? Thomas hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. In my professional experience, in cases like this, recovery of funds is extremely rare. The money is typically moved offshore immediately through multiple shells and proxies. Mom's composure cracked. A single tear traced down her cheek, followed by another. Brian worked his entire life for that money, she whispered. He was so careful, so responsible. And I just gave it away to the first smooth-talking man who made me feel special after he died. The raw pain in her voice cut through any satisfaction I might have felt at being proven right. This wasn't a victory, it was a tragedy. I moved to the chair beside her, hesitating before gently touching her hand. To my surprise, she didn't pull away. I'll help you through this, Mom, I said softly. We'll figure it out together. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. Why would you help me after how I treated you? The things I said. Because you're my mother. And because Dad would expect nothing less from me. Her face crumpled at the mention of Dad, and suddenly she was crying in earnest, deep, racking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere primal. I put my arm around her shoulders, feeling her body shake with grief that seemed about much more than lost money. Thomas quietly excused himself, mentioning he would be in the next room when we were ready to discuss next steps. Lisa followed, giving my shoulder a supportive squeeze as she passed. For nearly 20 minutes, Mom cried while I held her. It was the most physical contact we'd had in years, this proud woman who had increasingly held herself apart from displays of emotion. When her sobs finally subsided into occasional hiccups, she straightened and accepted the tissue box I offered. I've been such a fool, she said, wiping her eyes. Not just about Floyd. About everything since your father died. What do you mean? I asked. Mom stared at her hands, now twisting a tissue into a tight spiral. After Brian died, I felt invisible. For 30 years, I was Brian Mitchell's wife. I had an identity, a place in the world. Then suddenly, I was just a widow. Another gray-haired woman nobody notices. Mom. She shook her head. Let me finish, please. This is hard enough. After a deep breath, she continued. The country club membership was the beginning. I thought if I surrounded myself with wealthy, important people, some of that importance might rub off on me. I wanted to matter again. You've always mattered, I said. To me, to your friends. I know that here, she tapped her temple, but not here. Her hand moved to her heart. Then I met Floyd at a club mixer. He singled me out immediately, complimented my outfit, asked my opinion on things, treated me like I was fascinating and valuable. Looking back, it was so obviously calculated, but at the time. He's a professional manipulator, Mom. That's not your fault. But I was so eager to be manipulated, she admitted. And not just by him. By all of it, the status-seeking, the designer clothes, the exclusive restaurants. I was trying to fill this void that opened up when your father died. Nothing worked, so I just kept trying more expensive fixes. Her honesty was disarming. This vulnerability from my usually prideful mother created a space for my own confession. I could have handled things better too, I acknowledged. When I saw you changing, spending differently, I got judgmental. I made it about the money instead of asking what was really going on with you. Mom nodded slowly. We've never been good at talking about the important things, have we? Your father was our bridge that way. He could always get us to say what we really meant. A small, sad smile crossed my face. He would have seen through Floyd in about 5 minutes. 30 seconds, Mom corrected with a watery chuckle. Remember how he could always tell when that door-to-door insurance salesman was coming around? He'd grab the newspaper and pretend to be asleep on the porch. The shared memory created a moment of connection, a reminder of the family we had been. Then reality reasserted itself. "What am I going to do now?" Mom asked, her voice small. "I've lost nearly half of what your father left me. First, we make sure you don't lose any more," I said practically. "Then we figure out the rest together." I was so horrible to you, Cassandra. The things I said when you tried to warn me. Water under the bridge, I assured her, though in truth, the memory of her rejection still stung. What matters is what we do now. Mom wiped her eyes one final time and straightened her shoulders. "I suppose we should talk to Thomas about what happens next." When Thomas rejoined us, he brought options rather than recriminations. The first priority was securing Mom's remaining assets. He walked us through the process of placing a fraud alert on her accounts, changing all passwords and security questions, and formally canceling the pending transfer scheduled for the next day. As for pursuing Mr. Turner, Thomas explained, "You have several options, though I want to be realistic about expectations. We can file complaints with state and federal authorities, but as I mentioned, recovery of funds is unfortunately rare in these cases." "I want to try anyway," Mom said with unexpected firmness. "Not just for me, but to maybe prevent him from doing this to someone else." "That's commendable," Thomas nodded. "In that case, I recommend we document everything while your memories are fresh. Every conversation, promise, and transaction involving Mr. Turner." The next hour was spent in painstaking documentation. Mom's recall proved surprisingly detailed once she stopped defending Turner's actions. She remembered dates, specific promises, and the gradually escalating pressure tactics he had employed. Lisa, who had quietly returned to the room, took notes with professional precision. "There's something else you should consider," Lisa suggested gently. "These predators count on victims' embarrassment to avoid exposure. Would you be willing to file a police report? It might not lead to immediate consequences for Turner, but it creates an official record that could help establish a pattern for future cases." Mom hesitated, and I could see her wrestling with the humiliation of admitting publicly that she'd been deceived. Finally, she nodded. "I'll do it. Pride is what got me into this mess. I won't let it stop me from doing what's right now." As the meeting concluded, an awkward moment arrived. Mom and I stood facing each other in the office lobby, our temporary unity of purpose giving way to uncertainty about what came next. "I have a hotel room downtown," I said hesitantly. "I wasn't sure if—" "Please come home," Mom interrupted. "If you're willing, that is. The house, it feels very empty these days." The simple admission of loneliness, so contrary to the proud facade she'd maintained, touched me deeply. "I'd like that," I replied. That evening in the house I'd grown up in, Mom and I shared a simple dinner of delivered pizza, neither of us having the energy to cook. The familiar surroundings highlighted how much had changed. Photos of Dad still occupied their places of honor, but they were now joined by expensive art pieces that seemed at odds with the modest home's character. As we cleared the dishes, Mom paused by the kitchen window, looking out at the darkening garden. "I keep thinking about what your father would say if he could see me now." "He'd say you made a mistake, and now you're fixing it," I replied. Dad never dwelled on past errors. He was always focused on solutions. Mom turned, a hint of her old spirit flickering in her eyes. "He also would have said, 'I told you so,' at least 3 times by now." I laughed, recognizing the truth in her assessment. "Maybe 4 times. But kindly." The moment of levity passed, and Mom's expression grew serious again. "Will you stay through the weekend? I could use your help sorting through all this." "I've already arranged to work remotely next week," I told her. "I'm not going anywhere until we get this situation stabilized." Relief washed over her face. For the first time in years, she reached out and hugged me, not the perfunctory embrace we'd exchanged at holidays, but a real hug, tight and grateful. "I'm so sorry, Cassie," she whispered against my shoulder. "For everything." "I know, Mom," I replied, feeling something hard and defensive within me finally begin to soften. "I know." The next morning, I woke to the aroma of coffee and something baking, scents that transported me instantly back to childhood weekends when Dad would make his famous cinnamon rolls while Mom prepared breakfast. Following the familiar smells, I found Mom in the kitchen, removing muffins from the oven. "Blueberry," she said with a small smile. "Still your favorite, I hope?" "Always," I confirmed, touched that she remembered. We settled at the kitchen table with coffee and warm muffins, the morning sunlight creating a sense of possibility that had been absent in yesterday's emotional turmoil. For the first time in years, we talked, really talked, without the defensive barriers that had gradually built between us. "I think I need to sell the country club membership," Mom said after a thoughtful silence. "It's an expense I can't justify now, and, honestly, I'm not sure I even enjoy it anymore." "Are you sure?" I asked, knowing how much social importance she had attached to that membership. "The people I thought were friends there." She shook her head. When I mentioned Floyd's investments to a few of them, hoping for validation, they changed the subject immediately. I realize now they probably knew something was off, but didn't want to get involved. Those aren't real friendships. It was a surprisingly insightful self-assessment from a woman who had spent years chasing social status. Perhaps the shock of Floyd's betrayal had stripped away more than financial security. It had removed the illusions she'd been maintaining about her new lifestyle. Over the next 3 days, we established a new routine. Mornings were dedicated to practical matters, meeting with Thomas to restructure Mom's remaining investments, documenting everything for the authorities, and creating a sustainable financial plan moving forward. Afternoons and evenings were for healing the personal rifts between us, often through simple shared activities. Cooking dinner together, walking in the neighborhood, or sorting through old family photos. On Monday morning, we filed a formal police report about Floyd Turner. The detective who took our statement was professional, but not particularly optimistic. "Unfortunately, we see these cases too often," she explained. "The challenge is proving criminal intent versus just bad investment advice. These guys are careful about what they put in writing." "So he'll just get away with it?" Mom asked, disappointment evident in her voice. "Not necessarily," the detective replied. "We'll investigate, and your report creates an official record. If there are other victims, and there usually are, it helps establish a pattern." True to the detective's suggestion, within 2 weeks, 2 other women from the country club contacted Mom after hearing rumors about Floyd's hasty departure from Portland. After initial reluctance born of embarrassment, they agreed to file their own reports. One had lost nearly $300,000, even more than Mom. The solidarity that developed among these women proved unexpectedly healing for Mom. They formed an informal support group, meeting for coffee to share information and emotional support. What had begun as a humiliating personal failure transformed into a shared mission to warn others and hold Floyd accountable. Meanwhile, I extended my remote work arrangement indefinitely. My small Seattle condo could wait. Mom needed me now, and truthfully, I needed this time with her too. We were rebuilding something precious that had nearly been lost, not just because of Floyd Turner, but through years of poor communication and diverging values. Thomas proved invaluable in developing a revised financial plan for Mom. The hard reality was that she had lost nearly a third of her retirement savings, requiring significant lifestyle adjustments. Yet, as we worked through the practical implications, Mom showed surprising resilience. "Your father always said we could live comfortably on half of what we thought we needed," she remarked during one planning session. I think it's time I remembered that wisdom. Gradually, the expensive handbags were sold on consignment. The unused exercise equipment Dad would have rolled his eyes at was listed online. Each small sacrifice seemed to lighten Mom rather than depress her, as if she was shedding the artificial trappings that had never really suited her. 6 months after our confrontation with Floyd Turner, we received news from the detective handling the case. Turner had been arrested in San Diego, attempting to establish a new identity and investment scheme. The combined complaints from Portland, along with his previous history, had finally created enough momentum for serious charges. "They don't expect you'll get your money back," the detective explained gently during her call. "These types usually spend the money as quickly as they steal it." but he's facing significant prison time with the combined cases. Mom took the news with unexpected equanimity. The money's been gone in my mind for months now, she told me after the call. Knowing he can't do this to anyone else is worth more than the dollars. By this point, I had transitioned to a fully remote position with my company, splitting my time between Seattle and Portland. Mom had found unexpected purpose volunteering twice weekly at a senior center, specifically helping with financial literacy workshops for older adults. She spoke openly about her experience with investment fraud, turning her shame into a powerful cautionary tale that resonated with her peers. You know what the strangest part is? She mused one evening as we walked through the neighborhood. I'm happier now than I was before Floyd, even with less money. Trying to impress people I barely knew was exhausting. I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Dad always said happiness comes from inside, not outside. Your father was right about so many things, Mom acknowledged with a bittersweet smile. I wish I'd appreciated that more while he was here. The anniversary of our confrontation with Floyd arrived on a perfect spring day. To mark the occasion, Mom suggested we visit Dad's favorite spot, a simple bench overlooking the Willamette River where he used to read on Sunday afternoons. We sat together in comfortable silence, watching boats pass and children play nearby. I've been thinking about what I've learned this year, Mom said finally. Not just about financial scams, but about what really matters. And what's that? I asked. That grief makes us vulnerable in ways we don't recognize, she replied thoughtfully. After your father died, I was so focused on filling the emptiness that I never actually processed the loss. I tried to replace him with status, with possessions, ultimately with Floyd's false attention. I nodded, understanding her journey. And now? Now I know that healing doesn't come from running away from pain or covering it up with distractions. It comes from facing it honestly and building something new that honors what was lost. She reached over and squeezed my hand. Having you back in my life has been the greatest gift in all this mess. I'm so sorry for pushing you away when you were only trying to protect me. I could have been less judgmental, I admitted. I saw the changes in your spending, but never asked about the pain behind them. We both could have done better, Mom agreed. But what matters is that when it really counted, you were there. Just like your father would have been. As we walked back to the house that afternoon, I reflected on the painful journey we'd traveled. A financial predator had nearly destroyed my mother's security and our relationship. Yet, paradoxically, his deception had ultimately led to something precious. An authentic reconnection between mother and daughter based on honesty and mutual respect. Mom had lost $250,000, but gained something more valuable: self-knowledge, purpose, and renewed authentic relationships. I had lost my righteous indignation but gained a deeper understanding of how grief can distort judgment and how forgiveness liberates both parties. Most importantly, we had both learned that family bonds, when tested by crisis, can either break irreparably or emerge stronger than before. Ours had been bent to the breaking point, but ultimately held, not through stubborn denial or empty reconciliation, but through the harder work of honest communication and mutual support. Today, Mom continues her volunteer work warning seniors about financial exploitation. I divide my time between Seattle and Portland, ensuring she's never alone for too long. We still disagree sometimes. She thinks I work too much. I think she should sell the house and downsize. But now we discuss these differences with respect rather than judgment. As for Floyd Turner, he eventually accepted a plea deal and is serving 8 years for fraud. The money he stole remains gone, but its loss taught us both that true security comes not from financial resources alone, but from the authentic connections that sustain us through crisis. In the end, perhaps Dad said it best, in a letter I found among his papers months after our confrontation with Floyd: real wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in relationships that stand the test of time and trouble. Through our painful journey, Mom and I rediscovered this fundamental truth, one that no financial predator could ever steal. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between respecting someone's autonomy and protecting them from harm? How did you handle that delicate balance? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, Please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences that might help others navigate similar challenges. Remember, sometimes the most important conversations are the most difficult ones to initiate. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to protect those you love, even when it's uncomfortable.